Kia is on a roll with electric cars in Australia, offering one in almost every mainstream segment and price bracket. The EV6 and the EV9 are tremendous cars, but it's the two latest additions that are both the most affordable and therefore the most popular, which makes them the most important that we really care about today. They are the EV3 and the EV5, slightly bigger car. Now, a cursory glance may reveal that these two are quite similar, certainly in looks outside, but once you get under the skin, they're actually very, very different vehicles. Now, the EV3 is a car that's really impressed us here at Chasing Cars. We're living with this one long term, and it's proven such an easy vehicle to love. But the EV5, not so much. So today, we're going to settle once and for all whether this car deserves to sit in the family with the siblings or if it needs some serious revisions by comparing these two in a two-way battle. We're going to cover packaging, build quality, equipment levels, efficiency, and importantly for a brand that prides itself on localized chassis tuning, we're going to talk about how these cars drive. And I think that's where we're going to find some interesting findings. I'm John Law, this is Chasing Cars. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below and let's get into it. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. We've jumped into the studio because it's time to get forensic, starting with pricing and styling. Now, we've aligned these two closely on price. They have similar power outputs, a single front mounted motor, but one of them has a lot more range, but one of them has a lot more space. The EV5 is more than 30 centimeters longer than the EV3. So it's pretty impressive that you can get a car that much bigger for the same price. And actually quite a lot less when you're talking about drive-away prices, because Kia offers this nationally for $56,770 drive-away, which is exactly the same as the list priced, and then goes on to undercut that car by an awful lot. Now, you can get this standard range bulked up with the extended range battery for a couple of $1,000s more, and it's probably what you want to do given this car has sub 500 Ks of WLTP range. Keen pricing strategy is very important for the EV5 sales success because at sub 60K, it's competing not only with its smaller stablemate, but also cars like the Tesla Model Y, the Xpeng G6, and the BYD Sea Lion 7, which are key rivals for this car in competing for family electric car honors. The thing is though, this smaller, more compact EV3 does an awful lot with what it's got. So the trade-off of spending a little bit more money on a smaller vehicle to get niceties like ventilated seats and a heated steering wheel may very well be worth it. And we'll come back to styling as well, because I happen to think the EV3 pulls off its looks that little bit better. And although it may look really boxy when you first approach it, much like the EV5, when you come up close, you can see how Kia's actually relaxed a lot of the lines, like this one on the bonnet, and it's so much lower. It's almost like a little hatch cum coupe kind of car, and that makes it a lot more efficient in the real world, which we'll come back to shortly. For now, let's jump inside and check out the cabins. The EV3's cabin is a little bit tidier, a little bit neater, a little bit less busy, and therefore preferable, at least in my opinion. The car we have here has the light coloured cabin option with the tangerine highlights, and for me, I think it looks really cool. It adds a bit of personality to this car's interior that really suits the small SUV genre. When you're competing with something like a BYD Atto 3, having a little bit of jazz in the cabin really helps, and it's something that differentiates this car from its bigger sibling. What doesn't though is a very familiar control layout and control feel. Same size touchscreen, same slightly awkward HVAC screen, same digital driver's display in front of me, and similar steering wheel layout, but not identical, because we have the two-spoke, cool rugby ball kind of arrangement here, which I really like a little bit more than the EV5's. I think it just looks a little bit better and feels nicer in the hands for whatever reason. But the key controls are the same. You've got the gears on the stalk over here, same layout for the shortcut buttons and temperature control shortcuts and climate control modes as well. Now, what is a bit of a leap in a positive direction in our book here at Chasing Cars is the center console layout. The EV5's is a little bit convoluted with that weird bench seat that you can't actually sit on. Maybe good for doing your shoes up, but the EV3's is really quite clever. There are a couple of touches that you may miss on first check as well. For example, the wireless charging pad, rubberized, lots of bumpers to hold it in, but there's also a little chamfer here so that you don't bend the cord if instead of wireless charging, you're using your USB-C ports. Also in this top section, it is profiled to hold your phone in really well. Again, so you've got easy access to the USB-C for wireless charging. You can have it like that or down like that. little touches and attention to detail that are really, really cool in this car. Even here, you've got a removable partition that you can take in and out for longer or shorter items in the small amount of covered storage. The seats too are set a little bit higher in relation to the dashboard, which gives you a better view out, though can be a little bit compromising, especially if you're someone with a longer torso. For me, it's not so bad. I've still got decent headroom in the driver's seat, but I do cut it a little bit fine. Speaking of, seat adjust is actually pretty comparable between the base model EV5 and the mid-spec EV3. You get 10-way adjustment here with in-out lumbar, but as I mentioned, you get ventilated seats, which is just such a nice little luxury in a country like Australia that can get pretty hot. The final little practicality I wanted to come to are the door bins in the EV3, which easily accommodate a 1.5 litre water bottle, unlike the EV5s, which are capped at about 600 mils. Jumping into the EV5, and you're greeted with a cabin that is pretty cool, especially for a base model. This Air gets a whole lot of interesting materials, cool design, and something I love to see from a brand like Kia is the consistency of fitting the big screens across the range. We've got a 12.3-inch touchscreen here, 5-inch little HVAC panel, which yes is still obscured by the steering wheel, but is at least better than having it buried in the touchscreen, and a nice bright 12.3-inch digital driver's display in front of me. Wireless Apple CarPlay, of course, and the sound system is a 6-speaker unit, and it actually sounds okay, pretty decent for a base car. Usability is pretty good too. You've got these shortcut buttons here in this almost BMW-like center stack here with this little bit of rose gold. Pretty interesting. Speaking of that, we've got this kind of knit fabric on the front of the seats, though unfortunately where you actually sit is a faux leather, a vinyl material, which can be a little bit sweaty, and this car, as I mentioned before, doesn't get ventilated seats, but you do get 3-stage heating, which is nice in winter at least. Some of the practicalities are decent, but a little bit strange. Like if you've spent any time in an EV5, you'll know about this peculiar bench arrangement here. We've got this armrest that you can fold up and down, and then a sort of little pouch that I guess you could put your phone in, kind of useful, and then this rubberized storage tray, spot for a key, 2 cup holders, and then unfortunately this tray down here then becomes very difficult to access. At least it's pretty easy to find the USB charge ports. You've also got the 12-volt socket with that cool little panel that pops out that we've seen in a lot of Kias recently. Final practicality touches, the door bins are okay in this car but not super spacious. And then one of the other complaints I have about the EV5 is the steering wheel. It just feels a little bit flimsier than what you get in the EV3. This gloss material that runs around here gets a lot of fingerprints on it when you're touching it. But mostly on the whole, the EV5's cabin in the front is relatively decent. The EV3's backseat isn't as good as the EV5, just naturally because it's a smaller car. You can see I've got a little bit less space, mainly in the headroom and the tow room department, but legroom is a little bit compromised as well. Plus the seat backs are all hard, scratchy plastic, which is a little bit of a shame. Still, if you're a bit shorter than me, I'm 188 centimeters, you'll be pretty comfortable back here, and the view out is really quite good. I think slightly better than the EV5 with me set slightly higher. The drawback is slightly less under thigh support from this bench, because this car is designed mostly as a 2-seater with people to use the back seat less regularly than the EV5, which seems to be designed for 4 people at all times. That's not to say that the rear passengers miss out on amenity in the back of the EV3 though. We've still got easily accessible USB ports, we've still got vents back here, nice soft touch up here on the top of the doors, comfy armrest, pretty decent door bins, and pull down armrest here. Plus, it's not like you miss out on the design spunkiness of the front seat. You've still got the tangerine highlights everywhere, and my personal favorite is this center stack that looks like some kind of weird supervillain here with the little strakes for the eyes and the big wide open mouth that you can feed things like a phone or anything you want to store back there. Constant enjoyment. He's even wearing a little helmet. The back seat of the EV5 is probably its best aspect. Really spacious and well thought out. Even though it's an electric car with a battery under the floor, it doesn't feel like my feet are all the way up in the sky, and I've got really good under thigh support, certainly much better than what you get in a Model Y, even the updated one. There are some clever touches back here as well. You've got the coat hooks on the back of the headrests, which we've seen in a lot of Kia products, a really easily accessible USB-C port, and the chair actually slides and reclines, so you can get a bunch of different positions, pull down armrest, nice. You've also got leatherette upholstery back here, which would be super easy to clean if anything was spilled on it. Vents are actually in the B-pillars, which I find is a really good idea, better than blowing cool air onto your knees. That actually makes it up to the face. And look, it's not perfect. Scratchy materials, same as in the front there. The window doesn't go all the way down, and visibility isn't great because you've got a high bonnet line. But on the whole, this spacious, pretty comfortable experience in the back of the EV5 makes it better than the smaller EV3. Boots are really important, but do you know what's more important than that for brand building? Design cohesion, and these two are fantastic examples of that. They look so similar, yet just different enough from the rear end to differentiate them, but keep Kia's brand identity strong, especially in the EV space. And that's really cool. They're not just anonymous blobs, they're interesting, they're exciting, they're cool. Less exciting is the fact that this base car has a manual tailgate, but it's pretty light and it doesn't go too high. There's a nice handle there, so it's easy enough to close. We open that up and we find a really generous space, 513 litres of boot space, which is really competitive. Plus you get a bigger frunk in the EV5 than you do in the EV3, which you can actually store possibly a small bag in, whereas the EV3's is really strictly for charging cables. There are a couple of other smart things back here in the EV5's boot. These two panels are removable and there's extra storage under there with some plastic, perfect for wet swimmers and those sorts of things. You've also got these movable curry hooks here, which I really like. They feel a little bit cheap and nasty, but the functionality on them is quite handy. You can move them around for wherever you want to put your shopping bag hooks, and you've also got a 3-pin socket easily accessible in there. Let's go across to the EV3 where we get a standard power tailgate on the mid-spec Earth. And as you'd expect, you do get a slightly smaller boot, but it's not a real haircut. 460 litres, still seriously competitive, not just with other small SUVs, but even combustion medium SUVs. And as you can see, slightly lower load bay and really nice, generous width across there. You also get plenty of space underneath the floor. You've got a 2-stage, 2-height boot floor there with plenty of extra storage. My biggest issue with the EV3 is that it doesn't come with the smarts of the EV5. You don't have those movable shopping bag hooks. You've just got these 2 lame ones off to the side. And this one being my long-term, I have found that to be slightly annoying to live with. So I wish some of that had come across into the EV3 to make it really a packaging marvel. But as it is, both of these cars are really quite good and can fit your whole family's worth of stuff. Let's talk platforms, because that word has a slightly different meaning in the world of Kia compared to, say, the Volkswagen Group, where the MEB platform is genuinely quite well related across all of the products. What Hyundai and Kia call the E-GMP platform can be really differentiated depending on the product, and these two are about the furthest apart it can get. The EV3 sits on a lower cost version of the EV6 and EV9's architecture with 400 volt electronics and a ternary lithium ion battery under the floor in a skateboard style arrangement. That means you've got really good packaging for the rear suspension, which is one of the key differences between this car and the EV5. And if you get underneath both cars and have a good look, you'll notice that the EV5 does without the link that runs from the axle forward to the body that the EV3 gets. We're told this is because of packaging constraints to do with this Chinese-built EV5's battery setup, which is a FinDreams, so BYD's subsidiary, lithium iron phosphate blade battery pack. And again, if you look at it, it's much taller under there. And then building on that is the fact the EV5's platform isn't really the same derivative of E-GMP as the EV3's. It's quite different, using a mix of parts from combustion and electric cars. You can see that from some of the switchgear inside, the wipers, the steering wheel. It's all quite different and was even referred to us at Chasing Cars as a bit of a Frankenstein. Naturally, both of these cars are covered by Kia's 7-year unlimited kilometre warranty, which remains one of the best in the business. So let's see if we can separate them by talking about charging and range. Now, obviously we have the standard range EV5 here on test, but we'll also mention and put up the stats for the longer range car, because this car's WLTP is a little bit disappointing at just 400 kilometres. That said, we found that tested against each other in a fairly representative urban commuting environment, we were easily getting more than the WLTP range claim on the EV5, but it was consistently thirstier for electrons despite the fact it is actually lighter than the EV3. Now, this car has a couple of advantages and also some disadvantages. With its battery chemistry, charging happens a fair bit faster when you're on the DC pylon, but with the twist that you shouldn't really take this car beyond 90% charge in day-to-day use. Whereas the EV5, even in the extended range pack, you can take it to that 100% if you want to, with less of a chance of battery degradation. One place where the EV3 clearly wins is when it comes to servicing, where it's about $300 to service this smaller car over 5 years than the EV5. Why? We're not quite sure, but that's what it costs. So we've spoken about the theory of why the EV5 and the EV3 will drive differently out on the roads, but how does that come to light in practice? Well, initially, the EV5 seems pretty fine. We're on the base car with the smallest alloy wheels and chubbiest tires, so that does help a little bit. But to be honest, as soon as you back-to-back this EV5 with any other decently tuned car, you really start to notice some of the foibles. It starts with the dampers. It feels over-damped when it's just rolling along. You're constantly feeling the road imperfections beneath you. The body is going up and down, and it's quite a noisy suspension in this car. You can hear the way it's activating. It's clunky, it's thumpy, and it doesn't feel great. And that really comes to the fore in a place like Sydney, where a lot of our roads are really scabby, have lots of sharp-edged bumps, concrete expansion joints, potholes, those sorts of things. And it just makes the EV5 quite a tiring car to drive. It's something you'd expect the chubby tires to really soften the edge of, but even in the base car, it just doesn't. As we discussed, this car has non-frequency selective dampers, but yeah, again, chubbier tires should help. So the EV5 isn't great around town. It has a firm ride. You'd think that would mean that it's really nice, dynamic, and respectable on a good country road. And yet, directly compared to the EV3, you find that there's not as much body control. And it feels like there's two halves of this chassis moving through a corner. It does slightly strange things as you approach the limits. Not that you're going to be doing that a lot in a family SUV, but the thing is, the EV3 just always has your back. Even the steering in the EV5 isn't quite as crisp and precise. There's a lot more dead zone around the straight ahead. I can wiggle the wheel like this and I get almost no body movement. It's a lighter rack as well, so you want to ratchet it up into sport mode when you're on a decent road, and even then, it doesn't build weight in a natural manner, so it doesn't give you that confidence in this car on a back road. It is at least relatively quiet in other senses. Road noise is pretty well suppressed, and being an electric car, you get no engine noise, but I keep coming back to the fact that it not only doesn't feel better than the EV3, but it feels a long way off the best in class. It feels right about middle of the pack, and not being cheap enough to justify that should hurt the EV5 sales. And yet, because of its practicality that we've already discussed, it seems to do quite well in the sales charts. The motor performance is less than the EV3 as well. Even though it has more power and torque on paper, in reality, even though this car's 20 kilos lighter than the EV3 Air, when we tested the 0 to 100k an hour times, this was 8.5 seconds 0 to 100. Quite a big difference there, considering that this car should, in theory, be faster. Perhaps it comes down to the aerodynamics, but I have a suspicion it might be down to do with the reduction gears of these two cars, because the EV5 seems to continue to gather speed nicely into the 90, 100, 110k an hour range, whereas EV3 actually tails off there. So I think that's a little interesting story, interesting tidbit. The way this car manages its power is also a little bit worse. It's a little bit scrappier. We can probably chalk that up to some of the tire grip, which would be less on these Nexans than the Hankooks. And also, I think just the lateral vertical pitching in this car, which is quite uncomfortable. So yeah, I think when you drive it out on the road, initial impressions seem to be okay, but the more you live with the EV5, the more you start to discover some of those foibles, those annoyances, which just, yeah, they kind of hurt the experience in this vehicle. On the subject of dynamics, we'll put the EV5 through a couple of decent corners here at our private test facility. We'll come in at the same speed in both cars, 80 k's an hour into this tightening right-hander, and watch what happens. The EV5, woo! Whoa, that was a bit exciting. Nearly threw me off into the grass. So yeah, let's try that in the EV3 and see what happens, shall we? Immediately, the Kia EV3 feels like a better car on the road. There are so many little things that add up to this inherent sense of rightness in the EV3, which is so pleasing, so lovable, so easy to live with. From the firmer, more direct steering through to the chassis that is just that bit more absorbent, supple, and slick to drive out on the road. It really does add up to a more impressive driving experience. And that is despite this car being actually heavier than the EV5 and having a shorter wheelbase. Those two things would usually mean this car was a little bit busier in its ride and probably a little bit less competent on twisty roads, and yet the complete inverse is true, which comes down to the platform engineering and the inherent design of both of these cars, and the fact that the EV3 is just a better thing. It's really sweet. I'll talk about the suspension at a little bit more length first, because unlike the EV5, which has a suspension tune that means the body seems to move over every small bump, yet on really big compressions actually soaks it up, the EV3 glides over small imperfections. We don't have any big potholes here at the test track, but this road now feels smooth, whereas in the EV5 it feels busy and bumpy and quite scabby. So interesting difference there. It's also a quieter car to drive. There's less suspension noise in this EV3. Just generally feels a little bit more compliant, a little bit more well thought out. It's really lovely. And it's not like any of that comes at the cost of handling prowess, because although the EV3 feels distinctly non-sporty, in fact, sort of less sporty when you initially get into it than the EV5, it translates to such a good blend of ride and handling that is perfectly suited to Australian roads. And that's really ironic, given that the tuning of this car was done at Kia's Nanyang facility rather than here in Australia. Obviously, we had Australian input going in over there, but yeah, it's an interesting flip of the coin there. We'll come to motor tuning as well, because the EV3's accelerator pedal is just that little bit more gentle on the initial tip-in, so you don't end up with that horrible cabby foot feeling that you can do in some electric cars. Both cars obviously have plenty of regen settings, 3 settings. You've got iPedal and you've got an auto setting in this car as well, all adjustable with the paddles behind the wheel. In both of these Kias, I've actually come round to having it in level 1. I feel like that's the most natural, and when I'm getting out of petrol cars, hybrid cars, and into electric cars, it just makes it the most seamless transition. I should also say the EV3 has a more confident brake pedal feel as well. So that weightier steering and the more honest brake pedal feel, it's a little bit more like a combustion car. That sponginess at the top doesn't really do anything, and as soon as you get into the meat, you get braking power. It just makes this car feel all of a piece, where that EV5 just feels a little bit disconnected. And just as we did in the EV5, to finish off this little segment, I'm going to put this car through our tightening off-camber right-hander at about 80 k's an hour, bang on the same as we did in the EV5. Now let's see what happens. ESC cut in sooner, and everything was just a little bit more controlled. The EV5's ESC, as you probably saw on video, let me get a long way out of shape before stepping in. The EV3's almost imperceptibly tucked the back wheel in and brought me all back into line, all under control. This car brakes better as well, 6 meters better. That's a car length and a half, and that is not something to be sniffed at. So this is clearly the car that Kia has spent engineering money on for the rest of the world. With the EV5, yeah, keep coming back to it. The one we get in Australia at least just feels half-baked, underdone, and really not good enough when Kia is doing so many other good products right now. Time for a verdict. And if you said in the comments, why are you comparing these two cars because the EV5 is clearly more spacious inside and with a cleverer boot, then I think that's a fair thing to say. But that's not what this video was about. Instead, we wanted to get under the skin of these two cars, because where the EV3 feels like the perfect younger sibling in the EV family for Kia against the EV6 and the excellent EV9, the EV5 just falls a little bit short in some of the key metrics which separate Kia from emerging Chinese brands. For me, there's not enough of a reason to go for the EV5 over something like a Tesla Model Y, a Sea Lion 7 or an Xpeng G6. It's not cheaper, doesn't have more range, and although you do get better warranty and support in Australia, for me, the EV3 managed to hit so many highs. It's a really well packaged car, has the driving experience we've come to expect from Kia and the warranty backing. So for me, that car's a triumph, and we leave with the EV5 being a little bit of a dud in the range. The question remains as to whether Kia is going to be able to address some of the ride and handling concerns we found here at Chasing Cars with the EV5 with a midlife facelift, or if it's a more serious platform-related issue with the larger car. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments, so leave them down below and hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as always, thank you very much for watching.